45b. The life stories of the female lay disciples. 1. Sujātā, wife of the householder of Bārāṇasī. Aspiration in the past. The future Sujātā was reborn into the family of a rich man in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. On one occasion, as she was listening to a discourse by the Buddha, she saw a female lay disciple being named by the Buddha as the foremost in getting established in the three refuges. She aspired to that distinction. After making an extraordinary offering, she expressed her aspiration before the Buddha, who predicted that her aspiration would be fulfilled. Discipleship in her last existence. The future Sujātā was reborn either in the Deva realm or the human world for 100,000 eons. Some time before the appearance of the Buddha Gautama, she was reborn as the daughter of Seniya, in the town of Sena, near the Uruvala forest. When she came of age, she went to the banyan tree, which was near her town, and after making an offering to its guardian spirit, she vowed that if she should be married to a bridegroom of equal social status, and if she bore a boy as her first child, she would make an offering to the guardian spirit yearly. Her wish was fulfilled. Sujātā was married to the son of a rich man of Bārāṇasī, and her first child was a boy whom was named Yasa. She kept her vow and made annual offerings to the guardian spirit of the banyan tree. After making these annual offering at the banyan tree for 20 times or so, on the day the Buddha was to attain perfect awakening in the year 528 BCE, Sujātā went to make her annual offering to the guardian spirit of the banyan tree. On that occasion, Sujātā's son, Yasa, was already married and was indulging in luxury in the three mansions. This is mentioned because Sujātā had been generally imagined as a young maiden when she offered the specially prepared milk rice to the Buddha. On the full moon of May Visākhā, in 528 BCE, after 6 years of self-tormenting practice in search of the truth, the Buddha attained perfect awakening. Sujātā rose early that morning to make an offering at the banyan tree. On that day, the young calves somehow did not go near their mothers for milk. When the housemaids of Sujātā brought the vessels to draw milk from the cows, the nipples of the cows automatically flowed freely with milk. On seeing the strange phenomenon, Sujātā herself collected the milk, put it in a new cooking vessel, kindled the fire, and started cooking the rice milk. When the milk was being boiled, extra large bubbles arose in a series and rotated in clockwise direction in the pot, and not a drop of milk overflowed. The Mahabrahma held the white umbrella above the pot. The 4 great kings guarded the pot with the royal swords in hand. Sakka attended to the fire which boiled the milk. Devas brought various nutrients from the 4 island continents and put them into the pot. In these ways, the celestial beings joined in the effort of Sujātā in preparing the milk rice. While Sujātā was preparing the rice milk, she called her servant Pu and said, "Good girl, Pu, I believe the guardian spirit of the banyan tree is in a particularly good mood, because I had never seen such strange phenomena happen before in these long years. Now go quickly and clean the precinct for offering at the banyan tree." "Very well, madam," the servant girl responded and went to the banyan tree promptly. The Bodhisattva sat at the foot of the banyan tree, earlier than the time for collection of his daily alms food. The servant girl, who went to clean the foot of the banyan tree, mistook the Bodhisattva for the guardian spirit of the tree, and she reported to her mistress with excitement. Sujātā said, "Well, girl, if what you say is true, I will release you from bondage." Then dressing and decorating herself, Sujātā went to the banyan tree, carrying on her head the milk rice, which was put into a golden vessel worth 100,000 pieces of money, covered with a golden lid, and wrapped with a white piece of cloth, and over which garlands of fragrant flowers were placed so that they hang around the vessel. When she saw the Bodhisattva, whom she presumed to be the guardian spirit of the tree, she was intensely glad and approached him, bowing as she approached. Then she put down the vessel, took off the lid, and offered it to the Bodhisattva, saying, "May your desire come to fulfillment as has mine." Then she left him. The Bodhisattva went to the river Naranjara, put down the golden vessel of rice milk on its bank, and bathed in the river. Then coming out of the river, he ate the rice milk in 49 morsels. after which, he placed the empty gold vessel on the river Naranjara. It floated against the river current and then sank. He then went to the foot of the Bodhi tree. He attained perfect self-awakening, and remained there for 7 weeks. Each week at 7 locations at and around the Bodhi tree. At the end of 49 days, during which the Buddha dwelled in the attainment of cessation, he went to Isipatana Deer Park, where he set the Dhamma wheel rolling by expounding the Dhamma to the group of 5 ascetics. Then he saw the ripeness of the past merit of Yasa, the son of Sujātā, wife of the householder of Bras, and he waited for him by sitting underneath a tree. Yasa had grown weary of sensuous pleasure, after seeing the unsightly spectacle in his harem in the middle of the night. How suffering are these sentient beings with their mind and body being oppressed by all sorts of defilements. Oh, how terribly they are being tormented by defilements. Yasa murmured and left his home in sheer disgust with life. On leaving the town, he met the Buddha, and after listening to his discourse, he gained penetrative knowledge of the truth, and became established in the fruition of stream entry knowledge. Yasa's father traced his son's whereabouts almost behind his heels. He went and asked the Buddha whether his son came that way. The Buddha, by his power, hid Yasa from his father's vision, and taught a discourse to his father. At the end of which, Yasa's father attained stream entry knowledge, and Yasa became an arahat. Then, the Buddha made Yasa a monastic by summoning him. Come monastic. And Yasa's appearance instantly changed into that of a monastic, complete with alms bowl, robes and essential items for monastic use. These were all mind-made by the Buddha's power. Yasa's father invited the Buddha to his home the next day for an offering of alms food. The Buddha went, accompanied by Venerable Yasa. After the meal, he taught a discourse, at the end of which, Venerable Yasa's mother, Sujātā, and his erstwhile wife were established in the fruition of stream entry knowledge. On the same day, they were established in the 3 refuges. This is a brief account of Sujātā and her family. For fuller details, the reader may refer to Chapter 12. Foremost title achieved. On one occasion, while the Buddha was naming foremost female lay disciples, he declared, Itat aga bikhav mama svikna upsikna pahama saragakantna, yat ita sujarasinia daita. Monastics, among my female lay disciples who were the earliest to get established in the refuges, Sujātā, daughter of Seniya the householder, is the foremost. Otrais Visākhā, builder of Pubbārāma Monastery. Aspiration in the past. The future Visākhā was reborn into a rich man's family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. On one occasion, when she was listening to a discourse by the Buddha, she saw a female lay disciple being named by him as the foremost in giving and generosity. She aspired to that distinction. After making an extraordinary offering, she expressed her aspiration before the Buddha, who predicted that it would be fulfilled. The youngest daughter of King Kiki. The future Visākhā was reborn either in the Deva realm or the human world for 100,000 eons, where 5 Buddhas are to appear. During the time of Buddha Kassapa, she was reborn as the youngest of the 7 daughters of King Kiki, in the province of Kiki. Princess Saghats, the youngest of the 7 daughters of King Kiki, was reborn in the Deva realm, or the human realm, for the entire interim period between the 2 Buddhas Kassapa and Gautama. Discipleship in her last existence. During the time of Buddha Gautama, she was conceived in the womb of Simanadevi, the chief consort of Dhananjaya the householder, son of Mika the householder, in the town of Badiya, in the province of Aga. She was named Visākhā by her parents and kinsmen. When Visākhā was 7 years of age, the Buddha arrived in Badiya in the company of many monastics on his religious mission in the country. He visited Badiya for the purpose of causing the awakening of Sila, the Brahmin, and other persons whose past merit had ripened for awakening. 5 personages with great past merit. At that time, Mika, the father-in-law of Visākhā, was the chief among the 5 remarkable personages endowed with great past merit. 1. Mika the householder. 2. Kandapaduma, his wife. 3. Dhananjaya the son of Mika. 4. Sumanadevi, the wife of Dhananjaya. And 5. Pua, the servant of Mika. How remarkably endowed with great past merit these 5 persons were, will be described here. Condensed from the commentary on the Dhamma verses, Dhammapada, DHB 252. 1. The miraculous power of Mika the householder. One day Mika, wishing to know his own power, had his 1,250 granaries emptied. Then, after washing his head, he sat in front of the door of his house and glanced skyward. Suddenly, there rained from the sky heavy showers of top-quality red rice, which filled his 1,250 granaries. Mika further wished to know the miraculous powers of the members of his household, and asked them to find out themselves. 2. The miraculous power of Kandapaduma, wife of Mika. Then, Kandapaduma, wife of Mika, having adorned herself, took a measure of rice in the presence of everybody, and had it cooked. She sat at a seat prepared at her front door, and after announcing to all that anyone wishing to have cooked rice might go to her, she ladled it out with her golden ladle, to every caller. Her rice pot never diminished more than 1 ladle mark, even after the whole day's distribution. In her past existence, during the time of some past Buddha, this remarkable lady had offered alms food to the Sangha, with her left hand holding the rice vessel, and her right 1450 hand holding the spoon, filling the alms bowl full. As a result of that good deed, in her present existence, her left palm bore the mark of a lotus flower, Paduma, while her right palm bore the mark of a full moon, Kanda. Further, she had, during the time of some past Buddha, offered filtered water with her hand holding the water strainer, and going about from one monastic to another. As the result of that good deed, her right soul bore the mark of a full moon, while her left soul bore the mark of a lotus flower. On account of these distinctive marks on her palms and soles, she was named Kandapaduma, moon and lotuses, by her parents and kinsmen. 3. The miraculous power of Dhananjaya, son of Mika. Dhananjaya the householder, after washing his hair, sat at his door with 1,000 pieces of money of silver by his side. After making a public proclamation to the effect that anyone wishing to have money could ask from him, he filled the vessel of every caller with money. After having done so, his money of 1,000 pieces of money remained the same amount. 4. The miraculous power of Sumanadevi, the daughter-in-law of Mika. Sumanadevi adorned herself, and sat in the open with a basket of seed grain, after making an announcement that anyone wishing to have seed grain could ask from her. She distributed the seed grain to every caller, filling their vessel. After having done so, her basket of seed grain remained the same amount. 5. The miraculous power of Pua, the trusted servant of Mika. Pua, after dressing decently as benefiting his status, yoked a team of oxen, on whose side he made his 5-finger imprint of scented unguent, and whose horns he decorated with gold, harnessing them to golden chains, and mounting a plow, he started plowing Mika's field before the spectators. His plow made not just a furrow underneath his plow, but made 3 extra furrows on either side, so that in one operation he accomplished 7 times the effort. Thus the whole populace of Jambudapa obtained all their needs, such as rice, seed grain, money, etc., from Mika's house. This is a brief description of the 5 personages with great past merit. Within the area of Rajagaha, King Bimbisara's domain, besides Mika, there were 4 other householders, Jataka, Jaila, Pua, and Kakavaliya. King Bimbisara had within his domain these 5 householders with inexhaustible resources. Of these 5, the story of Pua the householder will be included in the story of Uttarā. The other 4 will be briefly described in chapter 45c. When Mika heard of the arrival of the Buddha, he said to his granddaughter, the daughter of Dhananjaya, "Granddaughter, what I am going to say is for the auspicious earning of merit for you, and as well as for me. Go and welcome the Buddha, who is on his way. Ride with your 500 female attendants in each of your coaches together with 500 maid servants." Visākhā established in stream entry at age 7. Visākhā gladly obeyed her grandfather, and left home in 500 coaches. Her grandfather might have thought of her riding the coach to the presence of the Buddha, such being his sense of self-importance. But Visākhā was a person of innate wisdom, and considered it improper to go to the Buddha's presence riding in a coach. As such, she dismounted at a reasonable distance from the Buddha, went on foot to him, made obeisance to him, and sat in a suitable place. The Buddha taught her a discourse which suited the mental frame of a 7-year-old. At the end of the discourse, Visākhā and her 500 attendants attained stream entry knowledge and first fruition. Mika also visited the Buddha, made obeisance to him, and sat in a suitable place. The Buddha taught a discourse to suit the mental frame of Mika, at the end of which, he was established in the fruition of stream entry knowledge. He invited the Buddha to an alms food offering in his house the next day. The following day he made an offering of delicious food to the Buddha and his Sangha. He made the offerings on a lavish scale for 15 days continuously. The Buddha stayed at Bodhiya for as long as there were people who deserved to be awakened. Visākhā and family moved to Sujātā. Pasenadi of Kosala, king of Sāmāvatī, wrote to King Bimbisara saying that as there was no householder of inexhaustible resources in his kingdom, he requested him to send one such family to Kosala. King Bimbisara held a conference with his ministers who said, "Great king, we cannot afford to spare any of our householders who are of inexhaustible resources. But to satisfy the king of Kosalans, let us send the son of one of your 5 such householders." King Bimbisara agreed to the proposal. Dhananjaya, son of Mika, was requested to move to the Kosalan kingdom. Herein, the commentary on the Dhamma verses Dhammapada states that the Kosalan king and King Bimbisara were brothers-in-law, in a double sense. King Bimbisara could not fail to satisfy the wish of the Kosalan king. He also could not offend his 5 famous householders, and so he requested Dhananjaya to go and settle in the Kosalan kingdom. Dhananjaya agreed, and he was sent to the king of the Kosalans. After moving his family from Bodhiya to the Kosalan kingdom, Dhananjaya identified a location which had great potential for human settlement. He asked the Kosalan king as to whose territory that location belonged to, and being told that it lay within the Kosalan kingdom, he further asked as to how far it was from Sāmāvatī, the capital. The king answered, "It is 1 league from here to Sāmāvatī." Then Dhananjaya said to the king, "Great king, Sāmāvatī is not big enough for my householder to live in. If your majesty would agree, I would settle in this location so that my big following can live in comfort." The king consented, and Dhananjaya founded a town at that location. Since it was a location of the settler's choice, it was named Sujātā. In Sāmāvatī, Pavahana, son of Migra the householder, had come of age. His father considered that it was time for his son to get married, and he told his kinsman to look for a bride for his son. The bride should come from a householder's family. Intelligent and discreet scouts were sent to look for such a bride, but none could be found in the city of Sāmāvatī. The scouts therefore went to Sujātā. One day, Visākhā went to a lake, which was outside Sujātā, accompanied by 500 attendant maidens, who were of the same age as her, to bathe and frolic in the water. At that time, the scouts from Sāmāvatī had left Sujātā, without success in looking for a suitable lady. They resorted to standing at the town's gate. Then rain started to pour down. Visākhā and her companions left the town to seek shelter from the rain in a public rest house. The 500 maidens ran into the rest house. None of them caught the eyes of the scouts as promising, but, coming behind these maidens was young Visākhā, who was walking towards the rest house in her normal pace, disregarding the rain. The scouts recognized her beauty. They pondered. As regards personal appearance, there can be no other girl in the world who can equal her. However, personal beauty is like a fresh ripe pomegranate. Her manner of speech needs to be assessed. We should start a conversation with her. And so they addressed her in the following way. "Little daughter, you walk like an elderly lady." Visākhā replied, "Fathers, why do you say so? Your companions entered this rest house by running, fearing to get wet. As for you, you came at your normal pace, like an elderly lady. You do not seem to mind your dress being drenched. Supposing an elephant or a horse were after you, would you take the same leisurely steps? Father, clothing may be bought without difficulty. What does my dress matter? But my 1452 person is important to me, for a girl is like a piece of merchandise. If by running, I were to stumble and break my limbs and become physically unsound, where is my worth as a likely bride? That was why I did not run. The scouts from Sāmāvatī agreed amongst themselves that they had found a suitable bride for their master's son. A girl fair in form as well as fair in speech, with a beautiful voice. They threw the bridal garland above Visākhā, who, understanding what it meant, acquiesced in the act by sitting on the spot. Migura's scout then put up a screen around the proposed bride. Having been thus ceremonially treated, Visākhā went back to her home accompanied by her maidservants. Migura's scouts went along to the house of her father, Dhananjaya the householder. A conversation between Migura's men and Visākha's father about the proposed betrothal took place as follows. Dhananjaya. O men, what is your native village? Elders. Householder. We represent Migura the householder of Sāmāvatī. Our master has learnt that you have a young daughter, who is of marriageable age, and he wants her as the bride for his son. We came to request the hand of your daughter. Dhananjaya. Very well, men. Your master is not our equal in wealth. However, he is of equal status by birth. It is a rare thing to meet one's equal, both in status and wealth. Go back and tell your master that his proposal for betrothal is accepted. Migura's representatives returned to Sāmāvatī and reported to him. Householder, we have obtained the consent of Dhananjaya, the householder of Sujātā, to have his daughter betrothed to Pubbārāma. Migura was overjoyed to find a bride from such a great family for his son. He sent an urgent message to Dhananjaya to the effect that he would come and fetch the bride in a few days' time. And would Dhananjaya made suitable arrangements? Dhananjaya replied that he would make every arrangement, and requested Migura to do the needful. The Kāḷī king honors the betrothal. Migura the householder went to the Kāḷī king and sought permission to go to Sujātā to attend the wedding ceremony of his son, Pubbārāma, a trusted servant of the king, to Visākhā, daughter of Dhananjaya the householder of Sujātā. The king said, Very well, householder, need we go with you? Great king, Migura said. How could we expect the presence of such an important personage as yourself? The king wanted to honor both parties to the betrothal with his presence and said, So be it, householder, I will go with you. And so the king went to Sujātā together with the householder. When Dhananjaya was informed of the arrival of Migura and the Kāḷī king, he greeted the king personally and escorted him to his house. He made careful arrangements to host the king and his army, Migura and his entourage. Food, lodging, flowers, perfumes and every item of comfort was provided to all, according to their need and status. He attended to these details personally, so that every guest had the impression that Dhananjaya the householder was doing a special favor to them. Later on one day, the Kāḷī king said to Dhananjaya through a messenger, Householder, we are here in too big a crowd. We might be causing a burden to you if we were to stay long. Maybe you should think of the time for sending the bride to Sāmāvatī. To which, Dhananjaya replied through the messenger, Great king, now is the rainy season. Your army will find it difficult to make a journey. Let the provision of every need of your army be my responsibility. I would request your majesty to return to Sāmāvatī only when I make the send-off. From the time of the arrival of Migura and his party, the whole of Sujātā was in a festive atmosphere. 3 months passed in gaiety. The rainy season ended in October. The great ornamental dress for the bride was still in the goldsmith's hand, nearing completion. Dhananjaya's executives reported to him that although every item needed in hosting the big gathering from Sāmāvatī was no problem, but they had met with a shortage of fuel for cooking. Dhananjaya ordered that all the stables for his horses and sheds for his elephants be dismantled for fuel. But these structures lasted only 15 days as fuel, and the matter was conveyed to Dhananjaya again, who said, Fuel would be hard to get during the rainy season. So, open all my textile stores, make strips of rough cloth into ropes, soak them in oil vats and use them as fuel. In this expedient way another 15 days' supply of fuel for cooking was made available, by which time the great ornamental dress for the bride was completed too. The bride was sent to the bridegroom on the next day. After the great bridal dress was completed, On the day of her departure, Dhananjaya called his daughter Visākhā to his side and gave this admonition. Dear daughter, a housewife, who is to serve her husband faithfully in his household, should know these principles and practice them accordingly. Dear daughter, a daughter-in-law living in the parents-in-law's house. 1. Should not take out the fire from the inside of the house. 2. Should not take the fire from outside into the house. 3. Should lend only to those who returned what they borrowed. 4. Should not lend to those who do not return what they borrowed. 5. Should give to those whether they give you back or not. 6. Sit peacefully. 7. Eat peacefully. 8. Sleep peacefully. 9. Tend to the fire respectfully. 10. Worship the deities of the house. On the following day, Dhananjaya had all his guests assembled together, and in the midst of the Kosalan army, appointed 8 learned householders to be patrons of Visākhā at Sāmāvatī, with the request that they, as a body, gave hearing and settled any disputes that might arise concerning her daughter. Then, he had the bride garbed in the great bridal dress of gold lace and jewels worth 90 million. He gave her 154 cartloads of money for her toiletry, 500 maid servants, 500 coaches which were drawn by thoroughbred horses, and a variety of useful items in 100 pieces for each kind. Having bequeathed these things, as his wedding present, in front of the assemblage, he first made a send-off for the Kosalan king and Migara the householder. When it was time for Visākhā to start her journey, Dhananjaya called the controller of his cattle yards and gave these instructions. My men, my daughter will need in her new home milk cows and thoroughbred bulls for harnessing to her carts. Let a herd of cattle that will fill the road to Sāmāvatī for an area of 3 miles in breadth and 3 miles in length be let out from the pens. The landmark for 3 miles is from the pens to a certain ravine. When the foremost cattle in the herd reach that ravine, let a drum signal be made so that the pens can be closed in time. And the responsible persons complied faithfully. As soon as the pens were opened, the stoutest milk cows only came out. But when the pens were closed, strong draft oxen and bulls jumped over the fence and followed Visākhā. This was the result of Visākha's past merit, because during the time of Buddha Kassapa, whenever she made an offering of food to the Sangha, she used to persuade the monastics to take various delicacies, even after they had taken their fill. Visākhā enters Sāmāvatī. When Visākha's carriage arrived at the city of Sāmāvatī, she considered whether she should enter the city seated in her coach or stand up, exposing herself to public view. When she remembered the great bridal dress, Mahalata, that she was wearing, she thought it wise to expose herself by standing in her carriage, so that the greatness of her bridal dress would be seen by all. As she did so, every citizen of Sāmāvatī who saw her was excited, saying among themselves, "Here she is! The famous Visākhā! How exquisitely beautiful! And look at that gorgeous bridal dress she wears! How becoming she looks in that wonderful dress!" Thus, Visākha's entry into her new residence at Migara's house was a great success. Right from the moment of her presence in Sāmāvatī, the citizens were fresh with the memories of their long stay in Sujātā, as guests of honor to Dhananjaya, who had so lavishly and caringly treated them. So they started sending gifts to Visākhā according to their means. Visākhā distributed the gifts to various other citizens of Sāmāvatī, ensuring that all houses received them. In this way, the citizens of Sāmāvatī were soaked in generosity from her first day there. On the first night of her arrival at her father-in-law's house, as soon as the first watch of the night had passed, and it was bedtime, a thoroughbred female ass in Migara's house gave birth to a foal. She had her maid servants hold up the lamps, and she attended to the delivery of the foal. She had the mother ass bathed in hot water, and then had oil applied onto her body. After seeing through these operations, she went back to her chamber. Wedding reception at Migara's house. Migara held a reception for 7 days in his house, on the occasion of his son's wedding. Even though the Buddha was staying in the Jetavana Monastery, Migara, being a follower of different faiths, disregarded the Buddha for the occasion of his son's wedding, but instead, he invited a houseful of naked ascetics. He called Visākhā to make obeisance to the arahats. When Visākhā heard the word arahats, she being a noble one Arya, herself, a stream enterer, eagerly went to see the so-called arahats. She was greatly disappointed to see the naked ascetic. How could these shameless fellows be arahats? She made her judgment and wondered why her father-in-law asked her to pay respects to them. Fie! Fie! She uttered in disgust and turned away. The naked ascetics, on their part, were angry at Visākha's behavior. Householder, they said to Migara, can't you get a better daughter-in-law? Why have you made this detestable woman, a follower of the ascetic Gautama, a member of your household? Cast away this demon of a woman. But Migara thought that he could not expel his daughter-in-law on the advice of the naked ascetics, for she came from a high-class family. So he had to palliate his teachers by saying, Teachers, young people are reckless and say things intentionally or otherwise. Would you kindly keep your patience? Being a good daughter-in-law, Visākhā attended on her father-in-law respectfully. She made him sit on a high seat, and served him with milk rice in which undiluted milk was used. She ladled it out with a gold spoon into a vessel, and gave it to Migara, who relished the meal. At that time, a monastic on his alms round stood at Migara's door. Visākhā saw the monastic, but, knowing her father-in-law was a follower of the naked ascetics, she thought it wise not to tell him about the presence of the monastic, but merely moved herself aside, so that the monastic would stand in direct view of Migara. Foolish as he was, Migara did see the monastic, but pretended not to notice him with his face turned down to his meal only. Visākhā knew that her father-in-law was purposely ignoring the monastic, so she went to the monastic and said, Empty-handed, I pay homage to you, venerable sir. My father-in-law lives only on old food. Hearing this, Migara was irritated. When Visākhā derided the naked ascetics, he could bear it. But now that his daughter-in-law said that he was eating excreta, which is how he interpreted Visākha's word for old food, he could not bear it. He held away his hand from the vessel he was eating from, and said angrily to his attendants, Keep this milk rice. Expel Visākhā from this house. Look, while I am eating this auspicious milk rice in my auspicious house, Visākhā says, I am eating human excreta. However, the whole of the household staff were Visākha's servants, and who would take Visākhā by the hand or by the feet and expel her? Far from doing physical violence against her, nobody in the house dared even to offend her by word. When Visākhā heard her father-in-law's angry words, she spoke to him cordially and respectfully. Father, I am not obliged to go away from this house by your command, which is not right and proper. You have not brought me to this house like a water-carrier girl. A good daughter, whose parents are still living, does not obey this kind of unlawful command. To see to righteous behavior on all sides. On the day of my departure, my father had appointed a panel of 8 wise householders, saying, If there should arise any problem concerning my daughter, you would be pleased to hear the case and settle it. These 8 people are my father's trustees in whom my security lies. Would you refer my case to them now? Migara thought Visākha's words were sensible. He sent for the panel of 8 learned householders and laid his complaint, saying, Gentlemen, this girl Visākhā has not been in this house for a week, and she insulted me, who lives in an auspicious house, as someone who eats excreta. Elders, now daughter, did you say as the householder has alleged? Visākhā, fathers, my father-in-law might like to eat excreta. I never referred to him as an eater of excreta. The fact is that as he was eating milk rice cooked with undiluted milk, a monastic stood at his door for alms food. My father-in-law ignored the monastic. So, I went up to the monastic and said, Empty-handed, I pay homage to you, venerable sir. My father-in-law lives only on old food. By this, I meant to say that my father-in-law does no deed of merit in his present existence, but is living only on the fruit of his past merit. Elders, householder, in this case, our daughter is not at fault. She has spoken reasonably. Why should you be angry? Migara, so be it, gentlemen. But his young girl had from the very first night in this house, ignored her husband, and absented herself from the house. Elders, dear daughter, did you absent yourself as alleged? Visākhā, fathers, I did not go to any other place, but the fact is that I was attending to the birth of a foal by a thoroughbred ass at the stable that night. I considered it my duty to do so. I had my maidservants hold the lamps, and I supervised the proper delivery of the foal. Elders, Householder, our daughter has been dutiful and done what even your maidservants could not do. She had done it for your good only. Why should you take it as an offense? Migara, so be it, gentlemen. But I wish to complain about her father, Dhananjaya's admonition to her on the day of her departure from her house. She was told not to take out the fire from the inside of the house. How would it be possible for us not to give the fire when needed by our next-door neighbors? Elders, dear daughter, were you told by your father as said by the householder? Visākhā, fathers, my father did not mean fire in the ordinary sense. What is meant is that the affairs of my parents-in-law and his family should not be divulged to the servants who are outsiders. If I were to do that, I would be causing unnecessary trouble at home. My father uses the expression, the fire from the inside of the house, in this sense only. Migara, so be it, gentlemen. But then her father also said that she should not take the fire from outside into the house. How would it be possible for us not to take the fire from another house, in case all the fire had gone out in our home? Elders, dear daughter, is that true? Visākhā, fathers, my father did not mean fire in the ordinary sense. What is meant here is that what the servants say in criticizing the family should not be reported to the members of the family. If I were to do so, I would be causing unnecessary trouble at home. My father used the expression, the fire from outside, in this sense only. Also when my father said, 3. You should lend only to those who return what they borrow. This is not to let those defaulters, who fail to return the things they borrow from me, get the better of me. 4. You should not lend to those who do not return what they borrow. This is not to let the defaulters exploit my goodness. 5. You should give to those whether they repay you or not. This means to be liberal to the poor relatives or friends who come to see me. I should make gifts to them regardless of whether they can repay me or not. 6. You should sit peacefully. This means I should show deference to my father-in-law and mother-in-law. When they approach, I should stand up. 7. You should eat peacefully. This means I should not eat before my parents-in-law and my husband have eaten. Only when they have had sufficient to eat, then I should eat. 8. You should sleep peacefully. This means I should not go to bed before my parents-in-law and my husband have gone to bed. Only after I have tended to their needs and they have retired, should I then go to bed. 9. You should tend to the fire. This means I should consider my parents-in-law and my husband as the fire that are to be always held in reverence. They should be attended on with respect. Migara, so be it, gentlemen. But what about her father's admonition to worship the deities of the house? Elders, dear daughter, what is it that your father-in-law wants to know? Visākhā, father, it is true that my father told me to worship the deities of the house. By these words, my father admonished me that when I become a housewife, I should give alms food to monastics who stand at my door for alms. Only after offering alms food to them should I eat. Elders, householder, you seem to please yourself by ignoring monastics who come to you for alms food. Migara found no word to retort to this sarcastic remark, and held down his face. Then the 8 learned householders said to Migara the householder, Householder, is there any other fault with our daughter? Migara admitted that there was none. They continued, Householder, in spite of her innocence, why did you expel her from your home? Then Visākhā stood up and said, Fathers, I did not deem it wise to obey my father-in-law's rash command in expelling me, for my father had entrusted me to your care, and to settle any problems concerning myself. Now that I am cleared of my fault, I am happy to go. Visākhā then returned to her private chamber, and ordered her male and female servants to prepare coaches, and do other things for travel. Thereupon, Migara called the 8-man 1457 panel of trustees, and apologized to Visākhā for his fault in their presence. Dear daughter, I had been reckless. Forgive me. Visākhā, seeing her opportunity, said to her father-in-law, Dear father, I really forgive you for what is forgivable, only that I wish to lay down a condition, which is that I, as an unshakable devotee of the Buddha, cannot stay away from the Sangha. If only I be allowed to make offerings to the Sangha freely, I shall stay here. Otherwise I will leave. To which Migara promptly replied, Dear daughter, you are at liberty to do so. Migra the householder attains stream entry. Thereafter, Visākhā invited the Buddha to her house the next day for an offering of food. On the following day, the Buddha went to her house, accompanied by a large number of monastics, who filled the house and were given seats. Naked ascetics, on learning of the visit of the Buddha to Migra's house, took a keen interest and sat watching around it. Visākhā made her food offerings and poured the libation water. After that she sent her assistant to inform her father-in-law that everything was ready to serve the meal to the Buddha and his Sangha, and invited him to attend to the Buddha personally. Migra, who was under instructions by his teachers, the naked ascetics, replied to Visākhā, "Let my daughter herself attend on the Buddha." Visākhā proceeded to do so, offering the Buddha various kinds of delicious food and beverages. After that, she informed her father-in-law that the offering of food to the Buddha had finished, and she invited him to join in listening to a discourse by the Buddha. Migra's past merit now began to tell on him, for he thought to himself, "If I were to refuse the invitation it would be very wrong." He got an inner urge to listen to the Buddha's discourse, and went to where he was sitting. However, his teachers, the naked ascetics, advised him to be screened off from the Buddha if he were to listen to his discourse. His servants therefore drew a curtain around the place where he was to sit. The Buddha taught his discourse as if asserting his own power of letting any listeners hear him well, however hidden or far away from him, whether divided by a wall or as distant as the whole extent of a world element. As if a big mango tree laden with its golden ripe fruit was shaken from its trunk, the Buddha directed his discourse beginning with almsgiving, through morality and the celestial forms of existence, culminating in the paths and fruitions, Magga Phala. Note here that when the Buddha gave a discourse, everyone among the audience, whether in front of him or at his back, whether thousands of world elements away, or even in the topmost Brahma realm of Ekanaha, feels that the Buddha is addressing him alone, face to face. It is like one's relationship with the moon, which rides on the sky in her own course, but which seems to you to be always above your head. This unrivaled power of the Buddha is the result of his fulfilling the perfections, more particularly, his supreme abandoning in giving away his head or limbs, his eyes or heart, or his freedom by serving others as a slave, or as in Vesantara's existence when he gave his young son and daughter to an old Brahmin, or his own wife Mati Devi. At the end of the discourse, Migra was established in the fruition of stream entry knowledge. He lifted the screen and prostrated at the Buddha's feet with the hands, knees and forehead touching the ground, and extolled Visākhā before the Buddha's presence with these words, "Dear daughter, from this day on, you are my mother." Since then Visākhā came to be known as Migra's mother. This is what is mentioned in the commentary on the collection of the numerical discourses, Uttarā Nikāya. In the commentary on the Dhamma verses Dhammappada, which follows the reciters of the text, it is mentioned thus. Migra came out of the screen, came to his daughter-in-law, and putting her breast in his mouth exclaimed, "From today on, you are my mother." Since then Visākhā came to be known as Migra's mother. Later, when a son was born to her, he was called son of Migra, the householder. In this connection, the commentary on the collection of the numerical discourses, Uttarā Nikāya, gives only a brief account of Visākhā, but for the benefit of the reader, the events connected with her will now be related based on the commentary to the Dhamma verses, Dhammappada, DHB 53. Migra's wife also attained stream entry. After recognizing his daughter-in-law as his mother, Migra went to the Buddha and prostrating himself at his feet, holding them adoringly and kissing them with his mouth, said, "Venerable Sir, previously I did not understand how the making of gifts to the different types of person is of benefit. Now I have come to know it, thanks to my daughter-in-law. Now I am saved from the wretched destinations, the lower worlds. The arrival of my daughter-in-law Visākhā has brought me my welfare and happiness." Further, he uttered this verse in elation, "Venerable Sir, today I have come to understand as to making gifts to what type of person is of great benefit. My daughter-in-law, the possessor of noble characteristics, has indeed, due to past merit, come to my house for my benefit." On the next day also, the good Visākhā invited the Buddha for another offering of food. Then on the following day, her mother-in-law also became a stream enterer. From that day onwards, Migara's house was an open door for all needs related to the teaching. The arrival of noble person at a house opens up the door to the eightfold path for its many residents, facilitating their entry to Nibbana. Visākhā honored by her father-in-law. Then Migara thought to himself, my daughter-in-law Visākhā is my great benefactor. I should repay my debt of gratitude to her. The great creeper Mahālāda. Bridal gown is too cumbersome for her to wear daily. I shall give her a suitable dress of distinction which may be worn by her by day, or by night, and in all her bodily postures. So thinking, he had a solid but flexible and easy-to-wear garment worth 100,000 pieces of money of silver, called the compact head Ganamahaka, made for Visākhā. When the dress was ready, he invited the Buddha and the Sangha to an offering of food. He let his daughter-in-law bathe in 16 pots of scented water, and put on the special dress in the presence of the Buddha, in which she was to pay homage to the Buddha. The Buddha spoke words in appreciation of the offering, and returned to the monastery. From that time onwards, Visākhā's life was one of meritorious deeds, such as giving generously, in which she took great delight, and which she could afford to do as much as she liked. She won wide recognition as the great female lay supporter after she obtained 8 special privileges as boon from the Buddha. The 8 privileges as boons. 1. Lifelong privilege of donating robes to the Sangha for use in the rainy season. 2. The privilege of offering food to visiting bhikkhus. 3. The privilege of offering food to traveling bhikkhus. 4. The privilege of offering food to sick bhikkhus. 5. The privilege of offering food to the bhikkhus who were nursing the sick bhikkhus. 6. The privilege of offering medicine to sick bhikkhus. 7. The lifelong privilege of offering gruel for breakfast. 8. The privilege of offering under robes to bhikkhunis. See Vin MV, PTS 1.92. Her story was comparable to that of the moon in the sky. Her reputation as the head of a big family also was noteworthy, for she had 10 sons and 10 daughters who had, like herself, 10 sons and 10 daughters each. These 400 grandchildren had also 10 sons and 10 daughters each, thus making a total of 8,000 great-grandchildren. The ancient venerables versified this fact thus: for having 20 children, 400 grandchildren and 8,000 great-grandchildren, Visākhā is renowned throughout Jambudvipa. Some distinctive qualities of Visākhā. Visākhā lived up to 120 years of age, not having a single gray hair. She looked always as if she was the age of a 16-year-old. When she went to the Buddha's monastery, accompanied by her children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, she was undistinguishable from them. When people saw Visākhā walking, they never felt satisfied with watching her walk. But when she stood, she looked as graceful. When she sat or when she was lying down, people thought her very graceful in that posture. She had physical might equivalent to 5 great elephant bulls. On one occasion, the king of Kosala, wishing to test her reputed strength, let loose a great elephant bull in her direction. The beast ran towards her menacingly with its trunk uplifted. Visākhā's 500 companion girls ran away in fear. Some of her 500 companions hugged her, as if to safeguard her. "What's up?" she asked them. They said, "Maiden, the king wants to test your strength, and has sent an attacking elephant bull at you." Visākhā thought, "What is the use of running away from this beast? And if I were to handle it squarely, I will be crushed." So thinking, she gently took the beast's trunk in her 2 fingers and turned them, which sent him reeling. The onlookers cheered Visākhā, and then proceeded home. The construction of the Pubbārāma Monastery. Visākhā was widely known as the auspicious lady, not only for her perennial beauty, but also for the health and robustness of her children and grandchildren, for none of them died before the end of their lifespan. The citizens of Sāmāvatī would invite Visākhā, as the guest of honor, whenever they held ceremonial offerings. One day, after attending such a function, she was proceeding to the Buddha's monastery, and thought it lacking in modesty if she went before him, attired in her gorgeous great creeper, Mahālāda dress. So, at the entrance to the monastery, She entrusted it to her maidservant who was reborn into the world, due to Visākha's past great deed. For she had to be like Visākhā, as strong as the equivalent of 5 great elephants' bulls. Leaving the great creeper dress with her maidservant, and putting on the compact head, Ganamahaka, dress instead, Visākhā went before the Buddha and listened to a discourse. After the discourse, she made obeisance to him and left the monastery. The maidservant left the great creeper dress at the place where she was listening to the Buddha's discourse, and forgotten to collect it when she left. It was Venerable Ananda's routine duty to collect things left through the forgetfulness of visitors to the Buddha's monastery. On that day, when he found Visākha's great creeper dress, he reported it to the Buddha, who asked him to store it away in a suitable place. Venerable Ananda picked it up and hung it at one end of the flight of stairs. Visākhā then went around the various places in the Jetavana monastery together with Suppiyā, a well-known female lay disciple, to find out the needs of the guest monastics, the sick monastics, and monastics who were going on a journey. It was usual for junior monastics and novices who needed ghee or honey or oil to bring containers to be filled by the 2 visiting ladies on such rounds. Suppiyā, the female lay disciple, was the wife of Suppiyā, the householder of Bras. This couple were highly devoted to the 3 treasures. They were regular supporters of the Sangha, with regard to the 4 monastic requisites. The female disciple Suppiyā once sacrificed her own flesh from the thigh to cook a soup for a sick monk. Due to her intense devotion to the Buddha, the spot where her flesh was cut was miraculously restored without leaving a scar. See Vin MV6, PTS 1.216. After she had visited the sick monastics, the junior monastics and novices, and attended to their needs, she left the Jetavana monastery by another gate. Before leaving the monastery compound, Visākhā asked her maidservant to bring the great creeper dress for her to wear. Then only the maid remembered it and said, "My lady, I have forgotten to pick it up." "Then go and fetch it," instructed Visākhā. "But," she continued, "in case Venerable Ananda were to have moved it to another place himself, say to him that the dress is to be considered as donated to him." She said this because she knew that Venerable Ananda always kept in his custody all articles left by forgetful visitors of the 4 classes to the Jetavana monastery. When Venerable Ananda saw Visākha's maidservant, he asked her why she returned, and being told of the great creeper dress, Venerable Ananda said to her, "I have hung it at one end of the stairway. Go and get it." Then she said, "Venerable Sir, my lady has instructed me that if the dress had been held in the hand of your reverence, she would not take it back because she would deem it already donated to you." The maid went back to Visākhā and reported the matter to her. Then Visākhā said to her, "My girl, I consider it donated to Venerable Ananda. I have no desire to wear it after Venerable Ananda has handled it. However, keeping it in his custody would be troublesome to him. I will donate something that is proper for the Sangha to use. Go and get it." And the maid did as she was bidden. Visākhā sent for the goldsmith and let them appraise the value of the great creeper dress. The goldsmith said, "This dress is worth 90 million in material value plus 100,000 in workmanship." Visākhā let the great creeper dress displayed on an elephant and put it up for public sale, but there was no one who could afford to buy a dress. 3-4. Khujjuttarā and Sāmāvatī. Aspirations in the past. The future Khujjuttarā and Sāmāvatī were reborn into the families of rich men in the city of Hasavat during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. As they went to the Buddha's monastery to listen to a discourse given by the Buddha, the future Khujjuttarā saw a female lay disciple being named by him as the foremost among female lay disciples in learning. She had a strong desire to become the same herself. After making an extraordinary offering to the Buddha, she expressed her aspiration to him, and he predicted the fulfillment of her aspiration. The future Sāmāvatī saw a female lay disciple being named by the Buddha as the foremost in abiding in loving kindness. She had a strong desire to be so designated by a Buddha in future time. After making an extraordinary offering to the Buddha, she expressed her aspiration to that designation to him, and he predicted that her aspiration would be fulfilled. These two ladies spent their whole lives in deeds of merit. At the end of their respective lifespan, they were reborn in the Deva realm. After being reborn in either the Deva realm or human world for 100,000 eons, the present world element with 5 Buddhas arrived. During the time of Buddha Gautama, in the city of Kosambi, Gosaka the householder and his wife made a routine alms-giving of 1,000 pieces of money every day. Discipleship in their last existences. It was during the time in which the Gosaka couple were practicing their routine generosity that the future Khujjuttarā passed away from her Deva existence and was conceived in the womb of the governess in the house of Gosaka. She was humpbacked at birth and was called Khujjuttarā. About the same time, the future Sāmāvatī passed away from her Deva existence and was reborn as the daughter of Bādavatiya the householder in Bādiya, in the province of Bādiya. She was named as Sāma by her parents. At one time, the town of Bādiya suffered from famine, and the people left the town for other towns for their own survival. Bādiya the householder said to his wife, "Dear wife, we cannot know when this famine will end. We too must leave this place. Our friend Gosaka the householder of Kosambi will recognize us if he sees us. Let us go to him." He told his wife about going to Gosaka, but the two householders had known each other by their reputations only and had never met. They decided to go, leaving behind their servants. The father, mother and daughter went in the direction of Kosambi, traveling by stages. After going through much hardship on the way, they at last reached Kosambi and stayed in a public rest house which was outside the city. Gosaka the householder was making his daily alms giving to all the needy who called at his door. Destitute travelers and mendicants thronged to his house every day. Bādavatiya the householder and his family were looking haggard after a hard journey. They decided they should not present themselves before Gosaka in the present unsightly state, but should rest and recoup themselves first. So, they remained at the rest house while their daughter Sāma was sent to the alms-giving station of Gosaka to beg for food. Sāmāvatī, as a daughter of a householder, was reluctant to jostle through her way in the unruly crowds of alms-seekers. As she stood apart in a hesitant manner, her dignified demeanor was noticed by the superintendent of alms distribution. He thought to himself, "While everyone else is making loud noise and trying to reach out ahead of others like in a fisherman's fish distribution, this young maiden is keeping back. She must be of some worthy family, and she has a fine personality." And so he addressed Sāmāvatī. "Dear girl, why don't you step up and beg?" She replied, "Dear father, how could a decent girl like me elbow through in such a jam-packed crowd? How many persons are there in your family?" "There are 3, father." The man doled out 3 food packages to her. Sāmāvatī gave the food to her parents. Her father, who had not eaten for some time, ate it greedily and died of overeating on that very day. On the next day, Sāmāvatī went to the food distribution point and asked for only 2 food packages. Her mother, who was not used to poor food as this, and she was also bereaved for the loss of her husband, and was taken ill that evening and died after midnight. Then on the next day, Sāmāvatī went and asked for only 1 food package. The superintendent asked her, "Dear girl, on the first day, you asked the food package for 3 persons. On the second day, you asked only for 2, and now on the third day, you are asking for only 1. Why is this?" Sāmāvatī told him about the death of her father on the first day, her mother after midnight on the second day, and that she alone survived. "Where do you come from?" the man inquired. Sāmāvatī told him how her family had fled famine in Bādiya, and the subsequent happenings. "In that case," the superintendent said, "you should be deemed as a daughter of Gosaka the householder, but I have no daughter of my own, so you will henceforth be my daughter." Sāmāvatī, the adopted daughter of the superintendent of the alms distribution place, asked her adopted father, "Father, why is there such a din at the place?" "When there is such a huge crowd, there has to be a big noise," he replied. "But father, I have an idea." "Then say it." "Father, let there be fencing around the place. Keep only 1 entrance. Let the people go in, receive their alms, and go out on the other end, through the only exit." The father took her advice, and after following her instruction, The distribution center then became as quiet and dignified as a lotus pond. Soon after that, Visākhā noted the silence that prevailed in the alms distribution place, which was usually full of noise, and asked his superintendent, "Are you not giving alms today?" "Yes, I am giving, master." "But why is it so quiet at the center which used to be so much of a din?" "Ah, that is true indeed, master. I have a wise daughter. I have been able to maintain quiet at the place on the advice of my daughter." "But I never knew you had a daughter. Where have you got one?" The superintendent had to confess the truth. He related to his master the circumstances under which Sāmāvatī became his adopted daughter. Thereupon Visākhā said to him, "Man, why did you do that? You are doing a very improper thing indeed. You have kept me in the dark about this girl, who is my daughter in this circumstance. Bring her to my house immediately." The superintendent had to obey his master's order. From then onwards, Sāmāvatī became the adopted daughter of Visākhā, who cherished her as his own daughter, and found for her 500 companions, who were of her own age and from worthy families. Sāmāvatī became queen of King Udina. One day when King Udina of Kosambi went round the city, he happened to see Sāmāvatī and her 500 maid companions romping in the garden and fell in love with her. On inquiring her parentage, he was told that she was the daughter of Visākhā the householder. The king inquired whether she was married or not, and learning that she was not married, he sent his royal messengers to Visākhā to ask for the hand of Sāmāvatī in marriage to him. Visākhā thought to himself, "Sāmāvatī is our only daughter. We cannot put her life at risk in the king's court, which is full of intriguing women." So he bluntly refused the king's request. The king was furious and ordered that Visākhā and his wife be evicted from their house, which was to be sealed off. When Sāmāvatī and her playmates returned and met her parents sitting miserably outside the house, she asked them what had happened. On hearing the story, she said to them, "Dear parents, why did you not tell the king's men that your daughter would go and live at the palace on the condition that her 500 maid companions were allowed to go with her there? Now, dear parents, give your reply to the king as I suggest." Her parents said to her, "Very well, daughter, we did not know how you would accept the king's proposal." King Udina was greatly pleased to hear the message from Visākhā. He said, "Let all the maid companions come and stay with Sāmāvatī, even if they number 1,000. Afterwards, on an auspicious day, at the auspicious hour when the planets were favorable, Sāmāvatī, together with her 500 companions, were conveyed to the palace of King Udina. The king appointed all 500 maids as ladies-in-waiting to his wife Sāmāvatī, when he made her queen with ceremonial anointing, and put her in a golden terrace mansion of her own, with the full state of a queen. About this time, Visākhā and his two householder friends, Khujjuttarā and Pubbārāma of Kosambi, learning the news of the appearance of the Buddha and his residence at Sāmāvatī, went to him. After listening to a discourse by the Buddha, they were established in stream entry knowledge. Later, they returned to Kosambi after making great offerings to the Buddha and his Sangha for 15 days. They obtained the assurance from the Buddha that he would visit Kosambi when they would invite him later. They built a monastery each, and on completion of which, they sent messages to the Buddha, inviting him to visit Kosambi. Hence, the Buddha began his journey to Kosambi, but seeing the ripeness of the past merit in a Brahmin couple by the name of Ngaya, he made a detour to Kamasadama, a market town in the province of Kuru, where he caused the Ngayas to comprehend the noble truths, and then proceeded to Kosambi. Traveling by stages, he reached Kosambi, and accepted the gift of 3 monasteries, which were donated by 3 noble, Arya, householders. When he entered the town on an alms-collecting round, he and his procession of monastics were reviled by a gang of drunken men, who were instigated by Queen Ngaya, who held a grudge against the Buddha. Venerable Ananda suggested to the Buddha that they leave the town, which appeared so inhospitable. Instead, the Buddha gave a discourse to Venerable Ananda on the importance of taming oneself, which was recorded in the commentary on the Dhamma verses, Dhammapada, DHB 32322. The Buddha stayed on for some time in Kosambi, in the 3 monasteries and towns. Khujjuttarā attained stream entry. The three householders of Kosambi attended on the Buddha and his Sangha in turns, making big offerings for a month. Then they extended the privileges of honoring the Buddha and his Sangha, in making great offerings, to other people of Kosambi, by organizing them into localities or associations. One day, the Buddha and his company of a large number of monastics were at the house of a florist, to receive his offerings. At that time Khujjuttarā, the personal attendant to Queen Sāmāvatī, went to buy flowers, which was her routine duty. The florist said to her, "Ah, dear Uttarā, I have no time to serve you this morning. I am busy attending on the Buddha and his Sangha. Will you lend a hand in our food offering? This good deed of yours will lead to your emancipation from bondage." Khujjuttarā ate her portion of food given by the florist, and joined him and his people in serving food to the Buddha. She learnt by heart the Buddha's discourse, which was taught to those who came near him. At the end of the discourse, she was established in the fruition of stream entry. Sāmāvatī and 500 ladies in waiting attain stream entry. Khujjuttarā, in her daily purchase of flowers for Queen Sāmāvatī, usually bought only 4 coins worth of flowers, and pocketed 4 coins out of the queen's daily allowance of 8 coins for flowers. But on the day she became a noble stream enterer, Khujjuttarā had no mind to steal the money entrusted to her, and bought 8 coins worth of flowers, which now filled her basket. Queen Sāmāvatī, seeing an unusually large quantity of flowers in Khujjuttarā's basket, asked her, "Why, dear Uttarā, do you have such a big basket of flowers today, unlike the previous days? Did the king increase my allowance for flowers?" Khujjuttarā, as a stream enterer, was now incapable of telling lies, and so confessed her previous misconduct. The queen asked her, "Why then have you brought such a big quantity of flowers today?" And Khujjuttarā replied, "Because I did not steal the money today. I cannot do so because I have realized Nibbana. I have comprehended deathlessness, after hearing the Buddha's discourse." Thereupon, Queen Sāmāvatī and her 500 ladies in waiting spread out their hands and asked Khujjuttarā, "Dear Uttarā, give us a share of that deathless Nibbana." Dear friends, Nibbana is not something that can be apportioned to others. I will tell you the words of the Buddha. If you are endowed with past merit, you may gain Nibbana, the deathless, on hearing them. Dear Uttarā, do go ahead. But I have to sit on a higher level than your seats before I start making the discourse. Queen Sāmāvatī arranged a higher seat for Khujjuttarā, and listened to her discourse, sitting at a lower level. Khujjuttarā, exercising the analytical knowledge pertaining to a stream enterer, while teaching still as a trainee Visākhā, gave a discourse to Sāmāvatī and her 500 ladies in waiting, at the end of which all of them were established in the fruition of stream entry. From that time onwards, Khujjuttarā was relieved of her all-round service duties, and was given the task of going to the Buddha's monastery to listen to his discourses, and in turn, to teach Queen Sāmāvatī and her ladies in waiting what she had learnt from the Buddha. In this way, Queen Sāmāvatī and her company of ladies in waiting were given regular discourses in the palace by Khujjuttarā. Khujjuttarā's past merit and demerit. Why was Khujjuttarā reborn into a slave family? It was due to her past evil deed. She had, during the time of Buddha Kassapa, made a female novice assist her in odd jobs, running errands for her. On account of that misdeed, she was reborn into a slave family, for 500 existences in succession. Why was she born with a humpback? When she was a lady at the court of the king of Bras before the advent of Buddha Gautama, she saw a Paksabuddha with a humpback, who went to the palace to collect alms food. Then she mimicked the Paksabuddha in the presence of the other court ladies. For that evil deed, she was born humpbacked in the present existence, which was her last existence. What merit did she earn in the past to be endowed with innate wisdom in her last existence? When she was a lady at the court of the king of Bras before the advent of the Buddha, she saw 8 Paksabuddhas carrying alms bowls which were filled with milk rice, and were piping hot. To relieve the heat on the hands of these revered ones, she removed 8 gold bangles, which she was wearing, and offered them to use as buffers underneath the alms bowls. That thoughtful deed was the merit she earned. Queen Gaia's intrigue against Queen Sāmāvatī. Although Queen Sāmāvatī and her 500 ladies in waiting had become stream enterers. They never had the opportunity of meeting the Buddha, because King Udina was a non-believer. Since they were stream enterers, they had a great longing to see the Buddha in person. All they could hope for was to get a glimpse of the Buddha whenever he was passing through the city. As there were no sufficient trellis windows to peep through, the ladies bore holes in the walls of their sleeping quarters, through which they peeped to gain precious glimpses of the Buddha. One day, as Queen Ngai was strolling outside, she noticed the small holes on the walls of the ladies in waiting of Queen Sāmāvatī, and asked the maidens what the holes were for. They did not know that Queen Ngai was holding a grudge against the Buddha, and honestly divulged their secret arrangement that had enabled them to watch the Buddha passing by, and to honor him by standing in their own rooms and peeping through the small holes in the wall. Queen Ngai thought to herself, grinning thus, "Now my time has come to avenge ascetic Gautama. These girl followers of Gautama will also have their deserts." Then, when Queen Ngai was alone with King Udina, she said to him, "Great King, Queen Sāmāvatī and her ladies in waiting have given their hearts to someone else besides you. They are plotting against your life in a few days. They have no affection for you. They have such great interest in ascetic Gautama that they peep at him whenever he goes into the city. They have made holes in the wall of their rooms to get a view of the ascetic Gautama." The king did not believe her at first, but Ngai repeated her story another time. Yet the king still did not believe her. For the third time, she repeated it, and when the king refused to believe her, she suggested that the king go to the private quarters of the ladies in waiting and inquire. The king did as she had suggested and saw the small holes. He asked the ladies in waiting about the holes, and they honestly and truthfully told him the purpose of the holes. The king was not angry with them, but merely ordered that the holes be closed. He let a trellis windows be fixed on the upstairs of the ladies' quarters. This was then the first malicious report on the part of Queen Ngai. Queen Ngai then hatched another plot. She said to the king, "Great king, let us put to the test the loyalty of Sāmāvatī and her company towards you. Send them 8 living hens, and ask them to cook a meal with them for your majesty." The king did as Ngai advised. Queen Sāmāvatī, being a noble disciple of the Buddha, was above killing, and so replied to the king that it would not be proper to kill the hens. But Ngai was crafty enough. She said to the king, "Great king, say to Sāmāvatī to cook a meal with the hens for ascetic Gautama." The king did as he was told. This time, Ngai had the hens killed on the way, before they reached Queen Sāmāvatī, who, on receiving the lifeless hens, had no suspicions about them in her simple mind. She had them cooked and sent the cooked dish to the Buddha. Queen Ngai then pointed out the fact of Sāmāvatī's behavior to the king, saying, "Now, do you see where Sāmāvatī's interest lies?" However, the king still did not take offense against his beloved Sāmāvatī. This was the second malicious plot on the part of Queen Ngai. King Udina had 3 queens. 1 Queen Sāmāvatī, 2 Queen Vajradhara, daughter of King Kapajota of Ujjaini, and 3 Queen Ngai. Each queen had 500 ladies in waiting. The king spent 7 days with each of his 3 queens in turn, in their respective palatial mansions. Queen Ngai kept a small cobra by her side in a bamboo container, which she stealthily transferred into the king's harp, and sealed the small hole in it. When the king visited her, the king always carried his harp wherever he went. He was so fond of it, because its music could cast a spell on elephants, which would become attracted to its player, the king. When the king was about to go to Queen Sāmāvatī, Queen Ngai said to him, as if she had real concern for the king's safety, "Great king, Sāmāvatī is a follower of ascetic Gautama. She does not value your life as much as a blade of grass. She is always intent on doing harm to you. So please beware." After the king had spent 7 days with Queen Sāmāvatī, he went to stay with Queen Ngai for another 7 days. She said to him, "How was it, great king? Did Sāmāvatī find no opportunity to harm you?" Then, taking the harp from the king's hand and shaking it, she exclaimed, "Why, there's some living thing moving about inside the harp." And after stealthily opened the small hole in the harp, she exclaimed, "Oh, death unto me! There is a snake in the harp." She dropped the harp and ran away from it. The snake's coming out from the harp was enough to arouse the king's anger. Like a bamboo forest on fire, the king hissed with fury, "Go and bring Sāmāvatī and all her ladies-in-waiting," he shouted. The king's men obeyed promptly. Queen Sāmāvatī knew that the king was angry with them. She advised her ladies-in-waiting to diffuse loving kindness towards the king for the whole day. When they were brought before the king, Sāmāvatī and her ladies-in-waiting were made to line up facing the king, who stood with bow and poisoned arrow. They remained diffusing loving kindness towards the king, who found himself unable to shoot, and at the same time unable to put down the bow and arrow. Perspiration flowed from his body, which was trembling. His mouth discharged saliva. He resembled a man who had suddenly lost his faculties. Queen Sāmāvatī said to him, "Great king, are you feeling exhausted?" The king replied, "My dear queen, I do feel exhausted. Be my support." "Very well, O king," she said. "Direct your arrow towards the ground." The king did as he was told. Then Sāmāvatī wished, "May the arrow be released." And the poisoned arrow went into the ground. At that moment, King Udina went and dipped himself in water, and in his wet cloths and hair, he fell at Sāmāvatī's feet, saying, "Forgive me, my dear queen. I acted foolishly under the instigation of Ngay." "I forgive you, king," said Sāmāvatī. "Very well, queen. You are full of forgiveness towards me. From now on, you are free to make offerings to the Buddha. Do make offerings, and do go to the Buddha's monastery in the afternoons, and attend his sermons. From now on you shall be well protected." Sāmāvatī, seizing the opportunity, made this request. "If so, great king, would you ask the Buddha to arrange for a monastic to come to the palace and teach us the good doctrine every day?" King Udina went to the Buddha and made the request, whereupon the Buddha assigned Venerable Ananda the task. From that time on, Sāmāvatī and her ladies-in-waiting invited Venerable Ananda to the palace and made daily food offerings, after which they learnt the doctrine from him. Venerable Ananda had in one of his past existences offered a needle and a small piece of robe material of a palm's width to a Paksabuddha for that good deed. In his present existence, he was endowed with innate wisdom and also received gifts of robe material on 500 occasions. Sāmāvatī and her ladies-in-waiting burnt to death. Queen Ngay was at her wits' end in her attempts to estrange King Udina from Queen Sāmāvatī. She became desperate and made a desperate attempt. She persuaded the king to go on a picnic in the park. She detailed her uncle to commit arson at the palace during the absence of the king. Queen Sāmāvatī and her ladies-in-waiting were to be ordered to remain indoors, using the king's authority. Then their mansion was to be burnt. Queen Ngay's uncle, the foolish Brahmin, executed the plot successfully. As their past evil deed had now fructified, Sāmāvatī and her 500 ladies-in-waiting could not dwell in the attainment of the fruition of stream entry on that fateful day, and lost their lives in the flames, like lumps of bran in a storehouse. The guards at Queen Sāmāvatī's mansion reported the calamity to the king. The king made discreet inquiries into the prime mover in this horrible case of arson, and knew that it was none other than Queen Ngay. However, he did not reveal his true intention. Instead, he sent for Queen Ngay and said to her, "Dear Ngay, you have done for me what I ought to have done by myself. You have done away with Sāmāvatī, who had made various attempts on my life. I adore you for this act. I am going to reward you amply. Now call your kinsman." Queen Ngay was delighted to hear the king's words. She gathered all her relatives and also her friends, who were as close as her relatives. When all of Ngay's associates were gathered, the king had deep pits dug in the palace ground, where all the culprits were put in with only their heads showing above the ground. Their heads were then severed, and then iron plowshares were driven across their broken skulls. As for Queen Ngay, her body was cut into pieces and cooked in oil. The past evil deeds of Sāmāvatī and her ladies-in-waiting. The death of Sāmāvatī and her ladies-in-waiting by being burnt alive had its root in their past evil deeds. In one of their existences before the advent of Buddha Gautama, the 500 maidens were standing on the river bank at the Ganges after having a long frolicking bath. As they were shivering with cold, they saw a small thatched hut nearby, which was the dwelling of a Paksabuddha. They rashly burnt it for warming themselves without first seeing whether there was any occupant inside or not. At that time, the Paksabuddha was dwelling in the attainment of cessation. Only when the little hut was reduced to ashes they found, to their horror, the sitting Paksabuddha in a motionless state. Although in setting fire to the hut, they had no intention to kill the Paksabuddha, the thought of killing him now entered their frightened minds, because they recognized him as the Paksabuddha, who went to the king's palace for daily alms food. To avoid the king's wrath, they must burn the revered one, and leave no trace of him. So by way of cremation, they gathered more fuel and set fire to the sitting Paksabuddha. This act being done with an intention to kill, it constituted a grave misdeed, carrying grave consequences. When the fuel which the maidens put to the fire was exhausted, the Paksabuddha rose from dwelling in the attainment of cessation, cleaned his robes of ashes and rising into the air, went away. Even as the maidens were watching in great wonder, they suffered in the lower worlds of Niraya for that evil deed, and as a remaining resultant thereof, they were burnt alive. Foremost titles achieved. After the utter destruction of Queen Sāmāvatī and her 500 ladies in waiting, there arose words of praise among the four types of assembly: the assembly of monks, that of nuns, that of male lay disciples, and that of female lay disciples, such that Khujjuttarā was learned, and although a woman, she could expound the doctrine that resulted in 500 ladies of the court attaining stream entry. Sāmāvatī was accomplished in the practice of dwelling in loving kindness, such that she was able to avert the arrow of King Udina through the diffusion of goodwill towards the king. Later on, when the Buddha was staying at the Jetavana Monastery and was naming female lay disciples, he declared, in respect of Khujjuttarā, Itad aga bhikkhave mama svikna upsikna bahasatna yat ida Khujjuttarā. Monastics, among my female lay disciples who are learned, Khujjuttarā is the foremost. Khujjuttarā earned the distinction because she was given by Queen Sāmāvatī and her ladies in waiting, after their attaining stream entry, the task of learning further about the Buddha's doctrine by listening from him and repeating his sermons daily. This privilege of hers made her so immersed in the doctrine that she learnt the Dhamma by heart. This was why the Buddha named her the foremost in learning. As a trainee Sekha, a noble one still learning by herself for awakening, Khujjuttarā was endowed with the four analytical knowledges pertaining to a trainee, which enabled her to bring awakening to Sāmāvatī and her ladies in waiting. While the Buddha was staying in Kosambi, Khujjuttarā went to the Buddha daily and listened to the sermons. On returning to the palace, she repeated what she had learnt to Sāmāvatī and her ladies in waiting. She would begin her discourses to them with these words. Indeed, the fortunate one has said this. I have heard the Arahat say this. The 112 discourses she made to the ladies have been put on record by the elders at the council as the Buddha's words, under the title of Thus Saids, Iti Vitaka. On that occasion, the Buddha said in respect of Sāmāvatī, Etadagga bhikkhave mama savikana upasikana metta vicharina nyadida Sāmāvatī. Monastics, among my female lay disciples who dwell in the absorption of loving kindness, Metajana, Sāmāvatī is the foremost. Bhiktais Uttarā Nandamātā. Aspiration in the past. The future Uttarā Nandamātā was reborn into a rich family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. As she was listening to a discourse by the Buddha, she saw a female lay disciple being named as the foremost among those who dwelt in absorption jhana. She had a strong desire for that distinction in some future existences. After making a great offering, she expressed her aspiration to the Buddha, who predicted that her aspiration would be fulfilled. Discipleship in her last existence. The future Uttarā, after passing away from that existence, was reborn either in the Deva realm or the human realm for 100,000 eons. During the time of Buddha Gautama, she was reborn as the daughter of Pwasha and his wife Uttarā, who were household servants to Sumana the householder in Rajagaha. It was a festive occasion in Rajagaha on account of the auspicious day, according to the planets. Sumana the householder of Rajagaha called to Pwasha and said, Pwa, Attending the festivities on this auspicious day and keeping the observance day precepts are actually matters that should not concern poor folks like you. Yet I am going to give you an allowance for this festive day, and you may either go and enjoy yourself at the festival or do your plowing as usual. Just let me know whichever you choose. Pubbārāma replied, Master, let me first consult this matter with my wife. At home, Pubbārāma told his wife Uttarā what his master had said to him. She said to him, Dear husband, the householder is our master. Whatever the master says to you is to be taken as justified, but I think you ought not to miss a day's work for him. And Pubbārāma, agreeing with his wife's suggestion, yoked his oxen and went to the field to do the plowing. It so happened that on that great day for Pubbārāma, Venerable Sāmāvatī, after rising from his absorption in the attainment of cessation, reviewed the world as to who deserved his blessing. He saw the ripening of Pubbārāma's past merit as a sufficing condition for awakening. Sufficing condition for awakening. For gaining the paths and fruitions Magafela, one must be endowed with past merit, for present favorable conditions by themselves cannot lead to one's awakening. Likewise, an action that brings its result in the present existence also needs the support of sufficing past merit to fructify. Therefore, being a virtuous person with the right reasoning, the fortunate present conditions need sufficing past merit for one to gain awakening. Sub-commentary. Venerable Sāmāvatī took his alms bowl and double robe at the time for alms round, and went to the place where Pubbārāma was plowing. He stood at a short distance where he could be seen by Pubbārāma, who on seeing him, stopped plowing and went up to him, and made his obeisance with the hands, knees and forehead touching the ground. Venerable Sāmāvatī, wishing to do good to the poor man, looked at him and asked him where some good water might be available. Pubbārāma thought that the Venerable wanted to wash his face, and so he made a toothbrush out of a creeper nearby and gave it to him. While Venerable Sāmāvatī was brushing his teeth, Pubbārāma took the alms bowl and water strainer and fetched a bowl full of fresh clear water, which was properly strained. After washing his face, Venerable Sāmāvatī went on his way to collect alms food. Then, it occurred to Pubbārāma thus. Venerable Sāmāvatī had never come this way before. He came today probably to bring benefit to me. Oh, if my wife had brought my meal, how good it would be to offer it to Venerable Sāmāvatī. Pubbārāma's wife remembered that it was an auspicious day according to the planets. She had cooked a meal early in the morning with the ration, which she received, and carried it to her husband. On the way, she saw Venerable Sāmāvatī and thought to herself, On previous days, although I saw him, I did not have anything to offer to Venerable Sāmāvatī, or when I had something to offer I did not meet him. Today I have both the gift and the monastic at hand. I will cook another meal for my husband, and offer this meal to Venerable Sāmāvatī now. Thinking thus, she put her cooked rice into Venerable Sāmāvatī's alms bowl, and made her wish, saying, May we be free from this life of poverty. Venerable Sāmāvatī responded, May your wish be fulfilled, showed appreciation and returned to the monastery. Herein, it may be noted that in performing a deed of merit there arise many impulsion thought processes of great merit, each consisting of 7 meritorious impulsions, or sub-moments of the thought process. If conditions are favorable, the first of these 7 impulsions brings immediate result, even in the very present existence. For present conditions must be there for such an immediate resultant. The receiving monastic is an arahat or at least a non-returner. The gift is something righteously obtained. The supporter has a strong will or volition in making the gift. His intention is intense before the act, during the act, and he feels glad for it after the act. And the receiving monastic has just arisen from dwelling in the attainment of cessation. And above all, there must be sufficient past merit in the supporter. In the case of Pubbārāma and his wife, all the required present and past conditions coexisted. His past merit to make him a rich man was ripe. So on that very day he reaped a harvest of solid lumps of gold from the field he was plowing. This elevated him to the status of a rich man, as conferred by the king. Pubbārāma's wife returned to her home without proceeding to her husband, and cooked another meal for her husband, and brought it to him, fearing that her husband might be angry, and more so because his anger would nullify the good consequence of her good act. She began with some palliative words, saying, Dear husband, I would request that you restrain yourself from anger for today." "Why?" asked her husband, wondering. "Dear husband, I met Venerable Sariputta on my way and offered him your meal. I had to go home and cook another meal for you. That is why I am rather late today." Puasha said to her, "Dear wife, you have done the most pleasing thing. I myself have offered a toothbrush and fresh water to him for washing his face early this morning. So for this day, every need of Venerable Sariputta has been supplied by us." The couple were elated about their good deeds. Puasha then had his meal. After that he took a nap with his head on his wife's lap. On waking up he saw all around him, where he had plowed, a sea of yellow objects somewhat like the yellow flowers of the sponge gourd profusely scattered about. Surprised, he asked his wife, "Dear wife, what are those things?" directing his finger at those yellow objects which were clods of earth. "Everywhere I turn, the earth looked like gold," his wife said. "Dear husband, perhaps you are having a hallucination after your hard work." But Puasha insisted, "Look there yourself." And she looked and exclaimed, "Dear husband, what you say is true. Those things do look like gold." Puasha stood up and picking up a clod of the yellow earth, struck it against the shaft of his plow. It was a soft lump of gold and stuck to the shaft like a lump of molasses. He called and said to his wife, showing a sample of gold, "Dear wife, other people have to wait 3 or 4 months to reap what they sow. For us our meritorious deed, sown on the fertile soil that is Venerable Sariputta, have now brought us this harvest. Throughout this field of about 2 acres, there is not a piece of earth the size of a myrobalan fruit, which has not turned into gold. What should we do about this?" his wife asked. "Dear wife," Puasha replied, "we cannot hide this amount of gold." So saying, he picked up clods of earth, filled the vessel, which was used to carry his meal, with lumps of gold, and went to the palace and showed it to the king. "King, where did you get this gold?" "Puasha, great king, the field I plowed today has been turned into clods of gold. May the king send his men take it." "King, what is your name?" "Puasha, great king, my name is Pua." Then the king ordered his men to yoke carts and go and collect the gold from Puasha's field. The family of Puasha attained stream entry. The king's men collected the clods of gold, saying, "This is what the great past merit of the king has brought into being." The gold clods instantly changed back into clods of earth. Not a piece of gold was collected by them. They reported the matter to the king. King Bimbisara told them, "In that case, men say, this is what Punna's great past merit has brought into being. When you pick up those clods." The men went back, said the words as instructed by the king when collecting the gold, and were successful in obtaining the gold. The clods of gold, taken in many cartloads, were piled on the main square of the palace. When heaped up it was the height of that of a palmyra tree. The king summoned merchants and asked, "Whose house in the city holds a pile of gold as big as this?" The merchants answered, "Great king, there is no house that holds this much gold." The king further asked, "What should we do with Pua? Who is the owner of this gold?" The merchants unanimously replied, "Great king, Pua should be given the title of royal treasurer." The king agreed, and so Puasha became the royal treasurer. All the gold gathered was handed over to him. On that same day, Puasha's inauguration as royal treasurer was held in high ceremonial state. Puasha, now the royal treasurer, held a grand celebration on that auspicious acquisition of the royal title for 7 days, when the Buddha and his Sangha were honored with magnificent offerings. On the 7th day, after hearing the Buddha's discourse, in appreciation of his great generosity, all the members of his family, Puasha, his wife Uttarā and their daughter Uttarā, were established in the fruition of stream entry. This is the story of Puasha, one of the 5 great rich men within the dominion of King Bimbisara, who had inexhaustible resources. The stories of the other 4 will be given in chapter 45c. Puasha's family and the Samana family. Samana, the householder of Rajagaha, on learning that Puasha had a grown-up daughter, sent messengers to ask for the hand of his daughter in marriage to his son. Puasha gave a flat refusal, and Samana became furious. "That fellow, who had been dependent on me, now disdains me because he has become a great man," he thought. conceited as he was of his own wealth. He sent this view of his to Pubbārāma through messengers. Pubbārāma was not to be outdone. He explained to Samana's messengers, "Your master is being arrogant. Even though what he says is a fact, he should remember that a man should not be expected to always remain poor because he was born poor. Now, I am wealthy enough to buy householders like Samana as slaves. But I do not say this in derogation of his lineage. I still honor him as a worthy householder. My point is my daughter is a stream enterer, a noble one, Arya, in the Buddha's teaching. She spends 1 gold coin every day on flowers in her offerings to the 3 treasures. I cannot send my daughter to the house of a non-believer like Samana." When Samana learnt the adamant stand taken by Pubbārāma, he changed his tone. He sent words to Pubbārāma saying, "I do not wish to break our old ties of friendship. I will see to it that my daughter-in-law gets 2 gold coins worth of flowers every day." Pubbārāma, being a man who knew the value of gratitude, agreed to Samana's proposition and sent his daughter in marriage to Samana's son. Uttarā's great faith in religious practice. One day, Uttarā said to her husband, "Dear husband, in my parents' house I keep the observance day, Upasatha, precepts 8 days every month. If you may agree, I would do that here too." Although she made her proposition in gentle words, her husband bluntly refused it. She had to put up with the refusal meekly. At the beginning of the rain's retreat, Vasa, period, she sought his permission again to keep the observance day during the 3-month period. Again she received a blunt refusal. When 2.5 months had gone by, and only 15 days were left of the rain's retreat period, Uttarā asked her parents to send her 15,000 pieces of money, letting them know that in the confines of wedlock, she had not had a day to keep the observance day. She did not say how and why the money was needed. Her parents did not bother to ask why she needed the money, but sent her the sum she asked for. Uttarā then sent for Sirama, a courtesan in Rajagaha, who was the sister of Javaka the physician, and said to her, "Dear Sirama, as I intend to keep the observance day for 15 days, I would request you to attend on my husband during these days for a fee of 15,000 coins." Sirama accepted her offer. Uttarā's husband was only too happy about this arrangement, and allowed her to keep the observance day for 15 days. Having obtained her husband's permission, Uttarā went about her meritorious deeds freely. She prepared food offerings for the Buddha early in the morning, assisted by her servants. After making offerings to the Buddha, and when the Buddha returned to the monastery, she kept the observance day precepts and would stay upstairs alone, reflecting on morality. 15 days passed peacefully. On the morning of the first waning of the last month of the 3-month period, the day on which her observance was to end, she was preparing gruel and other items of food for offering to the Buddha. She was busy with the job since early morning. Such is the nature of sensual objects that through their continued enjoyment, one tends to forget that they belong to another, and is tempted into thinking that they are one's own. At that time, the householder's son, having fun with Sirama on the upper story of the mansion, drew aside the lace curtain of the window and looked down into the inside of the house. At the same time, Uttarā happened to look up into the window, and her eyes met those of her husband. The husband smiled with the thought, "This Uttarā is looking like a being from the lower worlds of Niraya. How strange of her to deny herself the luxury of her status, and to toil herself unnecessarily in the kitchen, mingling with the servants." Uttarā also smiled with the thought, "This son of the householder, being forgetful, thinks that this life of ease and comfort is lasting." Sirama, who saw the couple smile at each other, became furious with jealousy. "This slave Uttarā is flirting with my husband even in my presence," she thought to herself, for she had now an illusion that she and the householder's son were actually husband and wife. She ran down the stairs fuming. Uttarā understood that Sirama, after half a month of dominion of the house, considered it her own. So she entered into the absorption of loving kindness, Medajana, and stood sedately. Sirama, rushing through the servants, took hold of a ladle, filled it with boiling oil from a pot which was cooking over the fire, and suddenly poured it over Uttarā's head. But, since Uttarā was dwelling in the absorption of loving kindness, and her whole body was diffused with loving kindness. She did not feel the heat of the oil which flowed over her body, like water onto a lotus leaf. At that moment, Uttara's servant accosted Sirima with abusive words, saying, "You slave woman, you are a mere hireling of our mistress. Yet after staying in this house for just 15 days, you try to rival our mistress." These words awakened Sirima to her true position. She realized she had gone too far. She went to Uttarā, fell on her feet, and apologized to her, saying, "Dear madam, I had been reckless in my behavior. Do forgive me." Uttarā replied, "Dear Sirima, I cannot accept your apology now. You must first obtain forgiveness from my father, the Buddha, before I can forgive you." Just then, the Buddha and his company of monastics arrived and sat on the seats prepared for them. Sirima approached the Buddha and prostrating herself at his feet said, "Venerable sir, I have done some wrong against Uttarā. I apologize to her for it, and she says that I must first obtain forgiveness from the Fortunate One before she will forgive me. May the Fortunate One forgive me." The Buddha said, "Sirima, I forgive you." Then she went to Uttarā and made obeisance to her as a token of her apology. The Buddha, in his discourse in appreciation of the food offering, uttered the following verse, DHB 223, "Conquer the angry one by loving kindness. Conquer the wicked one by goodness. Conquer the stingy one by generosity. Conquer the liar by speaking the truth." At the end of the discourse, Sirima was established in the fruition of stream entry. After the attainment, she invited the Buddha to her residence the next morning, and she made great offerings to the Buddha and his Sangha. Thus goes the story of Uttarā, the householder's daughter, who also was known as Nanda's mother after she gave birth to a son by the name of Nanda. Foremost title achieved. On one occasion, when the Buddha was residing at the Jetavana Monastery naming distinguished female lay disciples, he declared, "Itad aga bhikkhav mama svikna upsiknajina yad ida Uttarā Nandamātā." Monastics, among my female lay disciples who dwell in absorption jhana. Uttarā, the mother of Nanda, is the foremost. Six. Princess Suppavāsā the Koliyan. Aspiration in the past. The future Suppavāsā was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. While she was listening to a discourse by the Buddha, she saw a certain female lay disciple being named by him as the foremost in offering superior articles. She thus had a strong desire to become such a disciple in the future. After making extraordinary offerings, she aspired to that distinction in front of the Buddha, who predicted that her aspiration would be fulfilled in her future existence. Discipleship in her last existence. The future Suppavāsā, after being reborn in either the Deva realm or human realm for 100,000 eons, was reborn as a princess of the Sakyan clan in the city of Koliyan. She was named Suppavāsā. When she was of marriageable age, she was given in marriage to a Sakyan prince. As the housewife in the household of the prince, she had the occasion to listen to a discourse by the Buddha, which resulted in her attaining stream entry. Later, she gave birth to a son named Kāḷī. Foremost title achieved. At one time, Princess Suppavāsā, the mother of Kāḷī, offered choicest food to the Buddha and his Sangha. After finishing the meal, the Buddha taught a discourse in appreciation of the special offering, saying, "My female lay disciple Suppavāsā, in making this food offering, has in effect made 5 kinds of offering: life, good appearance, happiness, strength, and intelligence. Offering of life leads to longevity, either in the Deva realm or in the human realm. Offering of good appearance, happiness, strength, and intelligence leads to the blessing of good appearance, happiness, strength, and intelligence respectively either in the Deva realm or in the human realm." This was the occasion that became the ground for the Buddha's naming of Suppavāsā as a foremost female lay disciple. On another occasion, when the Buddha was residing in the Jetavana Monastery in Sāmāvatī and was naming distinguished female lay disciples, he declared, Itad aga bikhav mama svikna upsiknapada dayakna yad ida Suppavāsā Koliya daita. Monastics, among my female lay disciples who make gifts of the choicest quality, Suppavāsā, the Koliyan princess, is the foremost. Seven Suppiyā who attended the sick. Aspiration in the past. The future Suppiyā was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamutara. On one occasion, while listening to a discourse by the Buddha, she saw a certain female lay disciple being named as the foremost in looking after a sick monastic in an exceptional way. She had a strong desire to become such a disciple in her future existence. After making a great offering, she made her wish in front of the Buddha, who predicted that her wish would be fulfilled in her future existence. Discipleship in her last existence. After faring for 100,000 eons in the Deva realm, or the human realm, she was reborn into the family of a rich householder in the city of Bārāṇasī, during the time of Buddha Gautama, and was named Suppiyā. When she was of marriageable age, she became the wife of a son of a householder. It was then that the Buddha visited Bārāṇasī in the company of many monastics, and was staying in the monastery at the Isapatana Deer Park. Suppiyā, the householder's wife, visited the Buddha, and after listening to his discourse on her first visit, she was established in the fruition of stream entry. Suppiyā's astounding zeal in giving. One day, after listening to the Buddha's discourse, Suppiyā made a round of the monastic dwellings in the deer park to see to the needs of their residents. She came across a wan, enfeebled monastic who had taken some purgative. She asked him what sort of food or medicine would do him good. He replied, "Lay supporter meat soup would do me good." Suppiyā said, "So be it, venerable sir. I will send some meat soup to you." And she left after paying respects to the monastic. The next day, she sent her servant to buy some meat in the bazaar, hoping to get some meat for sale to unspecified buyers. The servant could not find such meat and reported to her. Suppiyā thought to herself, "I have promised to the sick monk to send meat soup. If I do not make good my word, he would feel ill at ease, because he is not likely to get meat soup from anywhere else. So, I must see that he gets the meat soup somehow." She went into her bedroom and cut a piece of flesh from her thigh, which she gave to her housemaid to cook some soup using the usual ingredients, such as chili, onion and other condiments, and said, "Take this soup to the sick monk and offer it to him. If he asks about me, tell him that I am taken ill." The housemaid did as she was told. The Buddha heard about the matter. The next morning, at the time of making the daily alms round, after being invited by her husband, he went to Suppiyā's house in the company of many monastics. After having sat at the special seat prepared for him, the Buddha asked the householder, "Where is Suppiyā?" "She is unwell, venerable sir," answered the householder. "Let her come to me, even though she is unwell. She is unable to walk, venerable sir." "Then carry her." The householder went and carried his wife Suppiyā, when to her surprise, at the instant she looked at the Buddha, the big wound on her thigh suddenly disappeared, and was restored to its normal flesh with body hair. Thereupon, the householder and his wife Suppiyā exclaimed, "Marvelous it is! Astounding it is! Friend, great is the power of the Fortunate One." At the very instant of seeing the Fortunate One, such a deep wound is restored to natural flesh. Feeling elated, they served the Buddha and his Sangha with the choicest food, specially prepared for offering. After finishing the meal, and teaching a discourse to the supporter, the Buddha returned to the monastery. Then at the congregation of monastics the Buddha asked, "Monastics, who asked for meat from Suppiyā the householder's wife?" "I did, venerable sir," answered the sick monastic. "Did she send the meat soup? Did you enjoy it?" "Yes, venerable sir, I did." "Did you ask what meat it is?" "No, venerable sir, I did not." The Buddha reprimanded the monastic, showing many reasons, and laid this rule of conduct for monastics. Monastics, lay supporters, who have conviction in the three treasures, even give up their own flesh to the Sangha. Monastics, human flesh should not be consumed. Any monastic who consumes human flesh is liable to a breach of a heavy offense, Thulakaya. Monastics, it is improper for a monastic to consume meat without inquiring about it. He who does so without inquiring about it incurs a breach of a wrongdoing, dukkha rule. Thus took place the event leading to Suppiyā, earning the title of foremost female lay disciple. Foremost title achieved. On one occasion, when the Buddha was residing in the Jetavana monastery naming distinguished female lay disciples, he declared, Itad aga bhikkhav mama svikna upsiknajilnapakna, yad ita Suppiyā upasaka. Monastics, among my female lay disciples who look after the sick monastics, Suppiyā is the foremost. Eight. Kāτiyāni of unshakable conviction. Aspiration in the past. During the time of Buddha Pajamutara, the future Kātiyāni was born into a rich man's family in the city of Hasavat. She saw a certain female lay disciple being named as the foremost in unshakable conviction in the teaching. She admired that female lay disciple. After making extraordinary offerings, she aspired to the same recognition in front of another Buddha, and he predicted that her aspiration would be fulfilled in a future existence. Discipleship in her last existence. The future Kātiyāni, for 100,000 eons was reborn either in the Deva realm or human realm, before she was reborn into the family of a householder in the town of Kuraraghara, during the time of Buddha Gautama. She was named Kātiyāni by her parents. When she came of age, she became a close friend of Kāḷī, the householder's wife, who was the mother of Venerable Soakika. See chapter 43:17. The unshakable conviction of Kātiyāni. On one occasion, Venerable Soakika, on his return from the Buddha's monastery, was requested by his mother to reproduce the Buddha's words for her benefit. In compliance, he delivered a discourse in the community hall for Dhamma lectures at the town square. As he was starting his discourse from the raised platform, with his mother as the chief listener, Kātiyāni, the householder in the company of her friend Kāḷī, arrived and reverentially listened to the discourse in the audience. At that time a group of 500 robbers who had dug a tunnel from the outskirts of the town to the house of Kātiyāni, according to their secret markings made in the day, had reached the house. Their leader did not join them, but was making personal inquiries into the activities of the townsfolk. He stood behind Kātiyāni in the assembly, where Venerable Soakika was teaching a discourse on the Dhamma. Kātiyāni said to her female assistants, "Go girl, get some oil from my house for the lamps. Let us light up the lamps at this meeting hall, and we shall share the merit with our friend Kāḷī in this way." The servant went to the house, but on noticing the robbers who were lurking in the tunnel, she was scared and returned to the assembly hall without bringing the oil. She reported the matter to her mistress, saying, "Madam, there is a tunnel dug in our compound by robbers." The robber chief heard the girl's urgent report to Kātiyāni and thought to himself, "If Kātiyāni were to go home in response to her maid's report, I will cut off her head immediately. If, on the other hand, she were to keep on listening to the discourse with attention, I will return her all the property which my men loot from her house." Kātiyāni said to her maid in whispers, "Hush! The robbers will take only what they find in the house. I am listening to the Dhamma, which is hard to be heard. Don't disturb and spoil it." When the robber chief heard Kātiyāni's words, he pondered, "What a devout lady she is! If I were to take the property looted from the house of such a meritorious lady, we would be devoured alive by the great earth." He hurried to Kātiyāni's residence, ordered his followers to return everything they had looted, and went back with them to the assembly hall to listen to the discourse, taking their seats at the end of the audience. Kātiyāni was established in the fruition of stream entry at the end of the discourse by Venerable Soakika. When dawn came, the robber chief went to Kātiyāni and prostrating at her feet said, "Dear madam, kindly forgive us for our fault." Kātiyāni asked, "What wrong have you done to me?" The robber chief admitted their plot to her. "I forgive you all," she said. "Madam, your forgiveness does not exonerate us yet. As a matter of fact, we would request that your son, Venerable Soakika, admit all 500 of us into the Sangha as novices." Kātiyāni took the gang to Venerable Soakika, and she herself bore all the responsibilities regarding the 4 requisites for them. They were admitted into the order as novices by Venerable Soakika. They strove to gain path knowledge, and ultimately became arahats. This is the story of Kātiyāni, the householder, whose conviction in the 3 treasures was unshakable. Foremost title achieved. On a later occasion, during the Buddha's residence at the Jetavana Monastery, when he was naming distinguished female lay disciples according to their respective merits, he declared, "Itad agabikave mama svikna upsiknavikapazana, yad ida Kātiyāni." Monastics, among my female lay disciples who have unshakable conviction in the teaching, Kātiyāni is the foremost. Nakulamātā. The story of Nakulamātā has already been told. When dealing with the story of Nakulamātā, see chapter 45a, 10. Here we only need pay attention to Nakulamātā. Nakulamātā and Nakulamātā were of the same aspiration in the time of Buddha Pajamutara. When the future Nakulamātā was a lay disciple, he witnessed a lay disciple being designated as the foremost among lay disciples who were close to the Buddha. He made a great offering and aspired to that designation. Likewise, when the future Nakulamātā witnessed a female lay disciple being designated as the foremost among female lay disciple who were close to the Buddha, she made great offerings and aspired to that title. Nakulamātā, like Nakulamātā, was declared by the Buddha, "Itad agabikave mama svikna upsiknavisikna, yat ida Nakulamātā gahapatani." Monastics, among the female lay disciples who are close to me, Nakulamātā is the foremost. Ten. K with Makron, the disciple of Kuraraghara. Aspiration in the past. The future K with Makron was reborn into the family of a rich man in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamutara. While listening to a discourse by the Buddha, she saw a female lay disciple being named by him as the foremost in devotion to the Buddhas. Even before meeting the Buddha, she strongly aspired to be such a person in her future existence. After making great offerings to the Buddha, she made her aspiration in front of him. The Buddha predicted that her aspiration would be fulfilled in her future life. Discipleship in her last existence. The future K with Makron, after being reborn in either the Deva realm or human realm for 100,000 eons, was reborn as a daughter of a householder in Rajagaha during the time of Buddha Gautama. She was named K with Makron by her parents. When she came of marriageable age, she was given in marriage to a son of a householder of Kuraraghara, which was a market town in Avanti province in the Deccan, and had to go and live with her parents-in-law in that town. After a time, she became pregnant. When her pregnancy advanced, K with Makron considered it unwise to have the child born at a place away from her own parents' home, and thus she went back to Rajagaha. Then on one night, the full moon of July Shah, 528 BCE, the day the discourse setting the Dhamma wheel turning, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, SN 56.11, was taught. At midnight, she happened to overhear the Devas, Satagiri and Himavata discussing the salutary effects of the 3 treasures above her mansion, in mid-air. She was instilled with devotion for the Buddha so much, so that even without having met him, she was established in the fruition of stream entry, see chapter 10. K with Makron was the first among the females who attained stream entry, Sotapati Magga, and became a noble disciple, so that she was the eldest among the Buddha's female disciples. That very night, she gave birth to a child, the future Venerable Soakika, and after staying at her parents' house for as long as she liked, she returned to Kuraraghara. Foremost title achieved. On one occasion, when the Buddha sat in glory at the congregation of monastics, in the Jetavana Monastery, and was naming distinguished female lay disciples, he declared, Itad aga bhikkhave mama svikna upsiknanasavapazana, yat ida k with makron upasika Kuraraghara. Monastics, among my female lay disciples who are devoted to me, even without having met me, K with Makron of Kuraraghara is the foremost.